Chair, you're alive.
Thank you. Welcome to the July 21st edition of the Annapolis Planning Commission. We have a number of other folks online. We have a special meeting tonight, which includes our colleagues from the Historic Preservation Commission, and we will get to that in a minute. But first, we have just some routine business to take care of. Our trustee recorder is not here tonight, but she will be watching this video after the fact to do our minutes. And one of the wonderful things about these being recorded. So in her absence, I will do the roll call that in her stead, and she'll record those. So I'll start off as the chair. Present. Mr. Iams?
Present.
Ms. Rubio Dorsey?
Here.
Mr. Waldman?
Present.
Ms. Butler?
Here.
Mr. Sale? I think Mr. Sale is not here. Mr. Spakianudis? Maybe joining us later. And am I missing anybody?
No.
Good. All righty. I think we have a quorum at any rate, so that we can jump into our next item of business, which is approval of the minutes from the July 7th meeting. Have everybody had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Would you like me to display them, or
No.
anybody have any questions or comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion on those?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Aye.
sweet.
Aye.
And then I'll
Thank you.
abstain. I wasn't present.
Mr.
for last
Chairman, with reference to the last meeting, do we have the findings for those two homeowners' applications been approved?
Unfortunately not. So they're still being, as I understand it, they didn't make it onto the agenda because they're still being reviewed by our new legal counsel, and hopefully we can get that.
Yes, I think that there were.
Yeah.
Yeah, those applicants are under some pressure to get started on their stuff. So perhaps those findings, opinions can be found and appropriately circulated. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We will try to get that all buttoned up and certainly approved by our next meeting.
Well, they're in the interim.
Yeah, and we'll talk to staff and see if we can do that offline, because as you mentioned, those things were fairly routine, and I hate for those applicants to have to wait too long for a procedural issue. Okay, so on our agenda, let me just bring up our agenda here. So we had a public hearing for 04022, which has been postponed. So we're going to skip over that and get on to our two pieces of new business. So the first is a presentation by Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning, which is will be a relatively brief comprehensive plan update, and then followed by the City Dock Resiliency Plan, and I imagine the majority of the meeting will deal with that item number 2. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lashinsky to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. If you could, oh, there you go. I'll share my screen. Presentation, perhaps my shortest ever. The intent here, by the way, Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. Good to be back with you to give you an update on the comprehensive plan. The intent tonight is not really to go into the content, but just to give you an overview of where we are with the process and what's left to do on this comprehensive plan. So an updated schedule. We're working towards a draft plan for early October, which would then trigger a 60-day comment period. There would be plan updates after that, and then in early 2023, an adoption process by City Council. So that 60-day comment period is when really anybody is able to review the draft and share comments. We'll have an online mechanism for doing that. People could also submit comments in written form, analog. We'll try to make it as accessible as possible. And I anticipate we'd have some webinars to give people an overview of why this comp plan is different from the last and what we're trying to address. And then there's these 3 ongoing sub-studies that I've shared in the past, which really will inform some of the updates and some of the content that's already in the comp plan draft. And those are going to be ongoing and ideally adopted following the comprehensive plan. We can go back to this if needed. The structure hasn't changed at all. We're still looking at these 3 visions of the city, if you will: the thriving city, the functional city, and the adaptive city. All of the state-required chapters are within those sections, and in addition to a few other arts and culture is not required, but that's unique to our comprehensive plan. The cover imagery will change. This is just kind of stock imagery for now. We're deliberating that. And then you have kind of an introductory section with an executive summary and an implementation section towards the end. Chapter structure is looks something like this. So you can kind of see a theme if you look at the land use, the municipal growth, the housing chapters. Demographic trends is unique, but in essence, each chapter has an overview, a brief overview. We have a synopsis of existing conditions. We try to summarize the needs, and then we provide the goals, the performance metrics, and the recommended actions that really respond to those needs. And just there's a trivial aspect to this presentation. I'm just trying to clarify what goes into making this plan. And it really just comes down to the writing, the analytical maps, the summary charts, illustrative images, and the document layout, which really just ties everything together. So that, in essence, is what we mean by the comprehensive plan. I know I wanted to share this primarily because when I present these PowerPoints at Planning Commission and elsewhere, a lot of people think that is the plan. That's just a presentation of content from the plan. What we're going to have in our draft comprehensive plan is something that looks like a book, a document that you could leaf through. So what's left? I made this chart to try to break down what we've done and approximately what we have left. So I wanted to highlight all the pieces that have really kind of been completed at this point at my 100% completion. So I'm just listing all of the chapters here and the 4 constituent pieces of each chapter and sort of what we where we stand. And I think one big theme is that we've had pretty much all the mapping done. I mean, some of the maps will get slightly updated based on new information. We have pretty much all of the writing done for the kind of the meat of the plan. Arts and culture needs a bit more. And then the introduction and the implementation section really need more. But the images, I mean, this is kind of typical. You pull images as you go. We're really trying to illustrate the themes, the salient content of the comprehensive plan, it's hard to really do the images until you have that narrative content and really understand what you're trying to illustrate. So we have quite a bit of work to do in just finding the right images. But that's kind of the fun part. So and I'm happy with where we're at, but this is essentially what we have left. And I'll just leave you with just an example of what goes into finding images for the comprehensive plan. I mean, this is an image from the Capitol Gazette of the Juneteenth parade. I mean, we want images that really are of the moment. This is a comprehensive plan that happens every 10 years. We want to show what the city is at this point in time and hint at where we're headed. And, I think in this image, you have, a parade that's only, in second year, maybe the first, second year of being a city holiday. You have the pride flag still up. You have a hint of our micro-mobility program here. I mean, so I think there's a lot of things going on in this picture that you would not have seen 10 years ago. So it's just an example of what we're looking for as we fill out the comp plan. And that's it for my presentation for tonight.
Well, thanks, Eric. Did any of the commissioners have questions on the document structure or anything that you think you'd like clarified?
I have a quick question. You have a summary of recommendations and so on. Is there any summary of just the changes from the previous comprehensive plan till now?
That's a good point. That's gonna, in the introduction, we're gonna be talking about that a bit. The implementation chapter also will have an assessment of what we were looking to do in 2009 and how we carried over a lot of that content. 2009 comprehensive plan didn't really have, I would say, a great action plan, where all the recommendations were listed out and a way of tracking them. And so we're doing something different with this one, where we're going to have these charts that list out all of the recommended actions with who's responsible, the timing, approximate funding level, and maybe a source for that funding. And but those are the areas where I think we would be picking up on that. That's a good point, though.
Other commissioners' questions?
Bring it on.
So I did have one question on in this thriving city section.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm not right here, but the demographic trends that's a section that's much more robust than was included in 2009. Is that correct?
Yeah, it will be. I mean, what we use to fill that section out is we did a demographic report and market study, but that was produced by BAE Urban Economics. Right. They did one in 2019. They updated it in 2021. So it has just some great patterns of what we're seeing, and a lot of the maps showing, have built off of that data. So
yeah, we saw a lot of that in presentations by your predecessor, and I'm happy to hear that was updated in 2021 also. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, well, thanks again, Eric. And we're really looking forward to getting the ground on this and getting it through certainly our piece of the review, looking to see what the public has to say about it, and getting on with the rest of the review process. So thanks.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Great. Okay, so we're down to our last and primary piece of presentation. So first of all, I wanted to welcome Tim Leahy, the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. And Tim, why don't you introduce your folks if you want to do so, and we can then jump right into the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for letting us join your meeting. And I'm Tim Leahy, the chair of the HPC. I see Kim Finch is here, one of our commissioners, and Will Scott. I thought there's Bobby Collins, who's my vice chair. And I think that's what we have tonight. So thanks very much. I think this is, as we said before, this works wonderfully to jointly update us on this really important project. So
yeah,
thank you.
Great. Well, we like having these joint things too. I think it's more efficient for the folks doing the work. They don't have to do things twice. And I think it's really good because we bring different perspectives to the table, and it's always good that we can hear them synchronously and not have to go back and watch a YouTube video. So I also see some other staff, and so I guess at this point, Eileen, are you gonna drive the?
Alex,
The
Alex,
city
I'll start.
manager is here, and I'd like him to start.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Well, welcome back to your new role, David. Appreciate it.
Not quite yet, but soon.
Right.
All
2
right.
weeks, but who's counting, right?
Yeah. Well, as much as we like to have you as the city manager, great to have you back as eventually as the public works director.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's good to see everybody, and thank you for having us back again. We're very excited about this project, as we have been all along, and hopefully you share our enthusiasm for the project. Just by way of update, I'm sure everybody on the call knows that the Hillman Garage no longer exists as it did formerly, so it's been demolished. The parking and mobility plan are up and running, and we think that they've been successful, but we have bumps in the road, no pun intended, from time to time, and then we work through those, but things seem to be going well. I just want to say thanks again for all of your help with Hillman Garage, because really and truly, and I've said this before, but I really believe it, the project was improved by our working with both groups, with the Planning Commission and HPC. So thank you for that. And we're looking forward to the same sort of results with City Dock. So that's what we're here for tonight. I'll ask as our team members speak, if they would just introduce themselves. We got a lot of folks on the call. We've got a great team, and we're working hard on City Dock, and we're really, really excited to move forward with that. We're hoping to start construction for that probably next fall of next year of 23 is our target date. That presumes that the new Hillman Garage will be up and operating by June of next year. We definitely want to get all that parking in place before we start disrupting City Dock. So again, thank you for inviting us, and I'm going to turn it over to Eileen.
Thanks very much. And I would ask Bryce, do you want to bring up the images?
I'll also mention that John Tower has joined. Hi, John, the Chief of Historic Preservation.
Next image, please. So we're very excited to be here. A tremendous amount of progress has been made. And in case there is anyone who has been living under a rock and has not noticed, as David said, the Hillman Garage is down, the demolition is complete, and the new construction is underway. So we are on schedule and very excited about that. Next slide, please. Right now, we are in the fairly early part of the City Dock design. It is on schedule. A lot of work has been done on the resiliency barriers, with input certainly from both the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission, the location, and the kinds of visibility and views that you all are interested in maintaining. You're going to hear tonight about some of the design and the layout for the boating facilities, the harbor master, the pump house, and coordination with the Burtis House, which is a little further down the road. While all of this design work is going on, and the City Dock design team, as many of you are aware, I believe there are 9 architects and landscape architects on that team. That team has also been meeting and working with, giving their input to Bryce and Scott and the architects and landscape architects. At the same time, the what we call legacy team, which is chaired by Chris Haley, the legacy team has been meeting more frequently. I know Bob was on a meeting the other day with us, and the work they're doing is fascinating. We're coming to a really challenging point where everyone has ideas about the stories they want to tell, what they want to see represented, and much of it is really celebratory. What we're hearing is more interest in celebrating the diversity and celebrating the entrepreneurships that have evolved over time for all of the different groups that have been able to prosper at City Dock. But now we move into a period of figuring out, in addition to telling these stories, how do you make this space a monumental space? And that's going to be the challenge for the architects and for all of you. Next slide, please. The parking and mobility, David mentioned, for the most part, has been very successful. As you know, all of the Hillman Garage parkers, 248 of the permanent parkers, have been relocated to Gotts and Knighton. There are the close-in garages, Whitmore, Gotts, and then there are garages, really over 3,000 parking spaces available on the fringes of downtown. Those are available. The city has been successful in capturing visitors. There's been a lot of messaging, marketing. We've had Visit Annapolis assist us in that. And people who have been coming for the day, we have largely been successful in capturing them at either Park Place or the stadium and then shuttling them into downtown. We've also been successful with the employees, both city employees and the business employees from downtown, of monthly passes at Park Place and people shuttling in. The residential parking, which now has Park Mobile, the residents are, for the most part, extremely pleased because they have more spaces available. The Park Mobile app is $4 an hour with a 2-hour limitation. So that has been very favorable to the residents. The one thing I would point out that we are still challenged on is getting local people, regional people, customers who are used to parking in the neighborhoods, getting them comfortable coming into downtown. That's the one area where there's got to be more outreach. Next slide, please. I'm sure you've all seen the Magenta Shuttle. Interestingly enough, the Magenta Shuttle turns out to be hugely successful. By the middle of June, there had been 9,000 riders. I tried to catch up with Kwaku today. I'm sure by now the number is closer to 15. I don't have his latest numbers. And it's interesting. It's easy to see this exactly where you can get off and get on is right on the side of the bus. It's free. And they have been maintaining an average 10-minute loop so that people can park at Park Place, hop on the bus, hop off. And we've gotten very, very good feedback in addition to high ridership. The other area that has been, next slide, please, is up and running as of May 17th is our on-demand service via, I'm sure you've seen these cars, small minivans actually, in town. There are 4 of them. And again, you can use the app or you can call via directly. It's a $2 ride for the first person, $1 for others. And it's a great way to get around town. That again is up and running and it covers most of the city. Next slide, please. We have been working closely with our partners. We've been working on resiliency, and the manager in particular has been working with the Naval Academy, as has Eric Lashinsky, in terms of some joint funding requests. We've been working with Visit Annapolis to reach out to visitors so that they know where to park, that it's easy to take the circulator in. And we've had continued on-site meetings with businesses and residents. This is right before the garage was demolished. We've had numerous meetings with both business and resident associations. And for the businesses, and the person who did a lot of heavy lifting on this was Mitchell Stevenson and Brennan Murphy. I don't know if they're both on this call, but putting together a terrific guide for all the businesses to have to give to their, not just their employees, but their customers, to tell people how to get around downtown, where to park. The website is up and running. And of course, perhaps most importantly, are our partners with the HPC and the Planning Commission and your tremendous input. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Bryce.
Thank you, Eileen and David, and all the commissioners. I'm really going to say just a word or two, and then Mahan Reichel is our landscape architect partner here, and they've done a great job with the planning. We're going to get started and go right through some of the planning components, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about some of the vertical design that we've done for the pump house and for the Harbor Master facility. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott Reichel.
Hey, good evening. We're really excited tonight because I think we've progressed the design and want to share with you some new things and also some of the resiliency research that we've done and solutions that we have that are new from what we had shown you last time. So what you see here are the existing conditions. It's those cross hatches are the existing elevations 2 and 4 and 2. We go to the next slide. And then you'd seen this before. This is the phasing or sequencing, I should say, of the project that will begin at Donner Park, progress around the dinghy dock, up the promenade along Dock Street, the Fountain Plaza is C, the elevated green space park is D, Susan Campbell Park, E, F is the connection to Bertus House, and G is the extension of Dock Street there. So we'll take you through some of these things as we'll in more detail now. So this is the current plan, and as I said, we'll take you. You can see that some of the things, one of the big changes that we've that happened is the pump station is now real. It's fixed. We have the architecture in that is and meets all the parameters that we needed to, and we've got. And Susan Campbell Park has become more of a green space, which is as a result of meeting with members of the CDAC. So I'll take you through in detail. The next slide. So this is indicating the different flood mitigation measures that we'll be taking. And so starting at Donner Park, we will have it'll be a brick wall with glass on top of it. We've got new views of that. We've found out more information about the glass walls. If those of you that were on the call the last presentation we had, just to the left of Donner on Compromise, that was also glass. We've now made that, we've realized we now can do the passive horizontal barriers that flip up that would go right on the bulkhead. And then at the dinghy dock or Alex Haley Plaza and that yellow are vertical pop-ups. So those literally are walls that just come straight up as opposed to flipping up. And then back to the flip up along Dock Street, all the way up to the Fountain Plaza. Then the magenta color is, those are actually fixed walls that are up at the elevation that we need to be. And we step up to them. So at the Dock Street Park, they're only 18 inches high. And then you step up to them all the way around. And then you could see the openings. We would have the flip up barriers. So next slide. So starting in the upper left, that is the hydraulic flip up barrier. That in our research, we found that there's two types. There's a hydraulic, and then there's one that comes up by buoyancy as the water comes up. The hydraulic allows you, if you look at the photo just below it, those long, narrow walls are called wiper walls. If you do the buoyancy type, you would have a wiper wall. If you do the hydraulic, you only need a very thin profile 8x8 post at the corners. In the middle is the passive vertical barrier. That's the one that literally pops up. That'll be down at the dinghy dock. It literally comes straight up and right out of the paving, and will just pop up as the floodwaters come. And then finally on the right is the glass flood wall. We've realized in talking to the manufacturers, the last flood wall, the last glass panels we'd shown you, we had that top rail that you see in the lower right. You do not need to have that. So you can have just a plain glass panel without the top rail. So that's what we're showing now at Donner, you'll see in some of the sketches. So the views that we, last meeting we had, the views that are faded out are the ones that you approved. The ones that are still in a darker magenta are the ones we'll share with you today. So along Compromise Street, that was where we had the glass panel, and I think there was objection to having that.
I just have to interrupt. Nothing was approved yet. So.
Okay, sorry. Well, yeah.
We're sensitive about that word.
Got it. Sorry, bad semantics. All right. Well, so if we go to the next, the two darker ones are what we'll be showing you. So this is a view of the dinghy dock as it exists. And you can see you've got three trees, the Alex Haley Plaza. This was the proposed, and you can see on the far right, we had the glass flood wall along the Compromise there. Yeah, in that blue, yeah, the blue. So what we'll show you now is that no longer is there. We're doing the pop-ups. So now you can see that that's just a pop-up there. And the other comments we had were that we wanted more space at the dinghy dock. So we've cut back the size of that bench planter area. And so the dinghy dock is larger. We've also added a tree back in. We only had 2 trees there because it was, people expressed concern that there wasn't enough shade. So we'll have 3 trees back in there. The lower left image is an image from a project up in Philadelphia where you can see the bollards and that low bench platform right in front of it. So it's very similar to what you would see from market. So next slide. So this is the view looking at what would be Donner Park, currently the parking lot. Next. This is what we had shown before was the glass flood walls. And you'll notice the big difference is that top rail is there. So you have that dark line along the top. And if you look to the left, we had it there along the bulkhead. So the next slide will show you that that is no longer there. You won't see that anymore. So currently that's disappeared. That would be just a flip up barrier. So only in a flood situation would you have anything there. And the glass flood wall at Donner is literally just panels of glass on top of the, with no top rail. Next. So now we're going to focus on the further end of the City Dock Park that we really hadn't developed as far as we have today. So this is sort of an update of those, and we'll begin from the Fountain Plaza and move out to Susan Campbell Park. Next. So this is Fountain Plaza on the left. You can see we've got an interactive fountain there. It's set up above the street about 2.5 feet. There's steps to get up there and a ramp that gets you up in the middle. That ramp, by the way, would also accommodate trucks that could get up for events that were on the event lawn. The view in the upper right is sitting on, there is a bench there, a platform bench that you can see in the plan view is sort of a triangular shape, and that is overlooking and looking out to the park, City Dock Park. And you can just see some precedent images of a typical fountain, pop jet fountain park. The other thing, that footprint on the right again, looking in the plan, that footprint of the pump house is accurate. And I guess the other thing to say is per a lot of your suggestions, Dock Street from Craig out to the end to the Burtis house will now be a pedestrian oriented street. It would be bricked. We would keep it, it would be removable bollards at the end, so emergency vehicles could still go out there, but that's new. That's something you hadn't seen before. So I think next, I believe, yeah, Bryce is going to take over from here and talk a little bit about the pump house.
So with this pump house building, this is a floor plan of that, and I just want to walk you through a little bit more detail about this and what we're having to accommodate here as programmed by the engineers and from WSP. This area that's shown on the right is an area that's relatively open. It does have a trellis type ceiling above or a structure above, and it is a wood platform that provides access to the pumps and the wellheads that are below. So we found a way, we think, in which we can create this platform of wood and then use this for open seating, maybe some concessions. We're excited about the ability to reuse this space and find a better purpose for it than simply a concrete pad for the pump house or for the wellheads and the pumps. So that area is relatively large, but the size is needed for the wells. Next to that, we have a relatively large rectangular shape that's going to be further subdivided, but it'll be electrical panels that are required. It'll be storage for the maintenance of the toilet rooms, and for other things that'll be needed to be stored there. We've got electrical that's currently in the Harbor Master building that's got to be accommodated, that provides electrical for boat show, et cetera. And then we have another open air structure here for a generator that will operate the pumps during an emergency, which is quite likely for flooding. And then, but we also have public toilets here, and the toilets would serve the fountain area and be accessible, of course, via ADA and the steps on the left and via ADA on the right. And Scott mentioned this ramp that we're using to allow for vehicles to get up on top of the event lawn, which is going to be very important for the boat show and for other programming. This building, which is approximately 60 feet wide by 25 feet deep. And I'm going to move to some of the vertical components of it now. So this is the design that we're proposing here for the pump house. We want to use some natural materials where we can, and so we're using a type of wood siding that would be a very natural finish that really provides almost like a rain screen for the structure there, since much of it is very open. And then we have some metal. We think there's a great opportunity for landscaping here that can grow on the side of the building. Hopefully some green roof above the toilet rooms. On the right, you see some sailcloth that we're using for shading for that area that covers the wellheads and the pumps. And then another open air structure that is above the generator. We have a small metal rail that goes around the pump area so that we can control access there when we need to. A couple of other views that we have there. This building is being proposed at elevation 7 feet above sea level. That is the height that currently zoning and planning requires for new structures in Annapolis. It's something we also want to investigate further with those folks because of the fact that if we're behind the flood proofing, perhaps the structure could be lower. That would keep it even a lower profile. We have put and designed this with a relatively flat roof, and that really came at the suggestion of the CDAC design committee for one, but just to keep it as low a profile as possible. And we think that's helpful. So the building is only about 13.5 feet, but it starts at elevation 7. This is another view from Dock Street, looking across that open area that would be available for some concessions or seating, as I mentioned before. And then a view from the Fountain Plaza, looking towards Prince George Street with the pump house there on the left. So that's the design of that structure, and we can certainly come back once we've been through all of this, not too much more, and answer any questions that you have. Scott, you want to come back to the event lawn?
Sure. So just so you understand, the Fountain Plaza to the far left of this is at 4.5. You'll step up 2 feet to get to the event lawn. The event lawn is at 6.5. Then there is a seat wall that runs the perimeter of the entire park, right? With the exception of where the steps get you up, but that seat wall is at 8. So you'll have an 18-inch basically seat wall that you can sit, not unlike the images that you see to the right in the middle. That's kind of the situation that we'll have along that promenade. So there'll be broad steps that get you up into the park, and then a top seat wall. The also new is we are proposing that we would have a shade structure, an elevated stage area that would be at 8. So the idea there is that in events that you could have entertainers that could focus either toward the event lawn or back to Susan B. Campbell. So it's double-sided. It's got a staircase on the backside that gets you down. So broad stair, which connects back to Susan Campbell, which was one of the comments, which I think it was a good one, to try and really connect those two spaces to one another. So the uses are similar. And then you can see on either side of that elevated stage, there are ramps up. So accessibility is on either side there. And then you can also see to the top of that plan, the extension of Dock Street, which is that brick promenade area there. So I think.
Yeah, and I just want to point out the boater facilities structure in the harbor master facility, which is just above this space. And we want to talk a little bit about that. We have been working on some programming and really trying to get all the players together that need to provide input for that, including the National Park Service, the harbor master, ideas for the boater facilities. We've got a lot of electrical that we've got to incorporate as well in this area. And some of that would happen here. We've actually found there's additional electrical that we didn't realize we really needed to accommodate on the site. And we think that would be a location for some of that. So this is, Scott, if you want to just speak to this, but that is that stage in the distance.
Yeah. And then you can see in the corner when we get into detail, but there's a sculpture in the far corner. It's just a suggestion placeholder. It'll show up in the plan. But we thought it could be kind of fun to have something kinetic that when the wind was blowing, that particular sculpture there is one that we just used on another project, and it actually moves when the wind comes in. It's very active and cool, and we thought that could be a neat sort of element that's out there, but it's just a placeholder. It's nothing more than that. We're not suggesting that exact sculpture. It's just something at the corner there to focus on. And then we're trying to make that stage as low a profile, that trellised area is low a profile, so you literally is transparent, that you see through it to Susan Campbell.
So that sculptural element really, hopefully, will be able to speak to some of the cultural legacy that we're trying to communicate here at City Dock. And so this will be something that committee will be providing some more input.
Yeah, definitely. So next. So now looking at Susan Campbell Park, we in discussions, I think it came that people really wanted to, the comments were, why is it so paved? Let's make it more green. Let's make it look more like the upper park. As you know, this is lower. It's at 4.5. So it's about 2 feet lower than the upper green space. We envision that the steps, you can see there are these fun sort of in the lower left image, in the images there in the center of the page, you can actually have these fun little tables that you could put on those steps. So you could really have this interaction between the two. That the image above is that sculpture that we had just shown in the image. And that's what's up in the upper right of the plan. So it's this focal element there, yes. And as Bryce said, we are meeting with the legacy group, and I'm sure they'll have many ideas as to what that could be, but, or if we want anything there at all, this is really just us saying that's a potential place for a placeholder. We purposely pulled back the area in the lower right as well to create ample space for loading and unloading of the tour boats there. So that's why that planter is pulled back a little bit smaller. So we have more room there. But we think that having that elevated stage, if you had smaller events, they could actually perform there and face Susan Campbell if you had smaller crowds. So it's a dual purpose thing. The upper right image are some fun sort of chase lounge benches that accommodate 2 and 3. They actually could be a family size, and we're just suggesting that it's not just as an image, but that they could be great out at the end here where you're just boat watching. So next. And so this is a view looking back from, you're at the corner, or you maybe just got off the tour boat and you're looking back, you can see the Naval Academy behind. You're looking back at the trellis and the staircase, the grand stairs that connects you up to the stage area, trellised area, and the ramps on either side that connect up for accessibility. Next. And then this is sort of looking from the right of Ego Alley, or you're along the promenade where the boats are loading and unloading. And this is looking back out to the bay with that sculpture in the distance. And then this is, I think this is a big improvement, having the dock street become pedestrian oriented. And you can see the images below. This would be a curbless section. The white line that looks like a curb would be a line there to demarcate the edge, but it literally is flush. So you will be able to traverse this thing from the restaurant there all the way across to the park. We see it as a pedestrian way. It really, I think, be a great addition to the City Dock Park, and it creates even more space for us to be able to spill into. Now, we do have to maintain, even in big events, we have to maintain access, fire access, but only about 20 feet. So we've got plenty of room there. But we feel these images are really close to what you'll be experiencing when you're there. And this is a view back, a section through that. So you can see the restaurants. Latitude 38 is that outdoor dining there. Trees along City Dock Street, and then this curbless section, and then you step up to the event lawn. So it really becomes an extension, a promenade of that. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Bryce.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the Burtis House addition and the boater facilities, harbor master structure that I mentioned earlier. On the left here is a Sanborn map that, this one happens to be from 1897, I think, or something like that. But, you get a sense of how structures historically were configured here at City Dock. I think we're all excited about the fact that we'll have a lot of open space here, but as we try to add these new structures, we want to do it in a sensitive way and think about how these structures can speak to one another and coexist with the open space. So this is the Wooner for the pedestrian-oriented street at Dock Street that Scott spoke about. We know there's a great opportunity for renovation and repurposing and a new structure where Latitude 38 is there, certainly someday. And so we want to accommodate that, and we'll have to be flexible and be able to work at a lower elevation, perhaps in the near run, and consider how that street may want to come up higher ultimately. But this is the Burtis House, the original Burtis House being this square structure at the top. There's a small addition on the back that the preservation community has suggested removing and making way for a small expansion addition that could house a museum for the National Park Service. And then we think there's an opportunity for our boater facilities here. And we're currently showing and proposing an alleyway between these two structures that will take us from the existing wooden dock there, where a lot of people come in with dinghies, which is about elevation 3.5, to get back up to elevation 7, where this building is proposed to be constructed again at elevation 7 above sea level. So it allows us the opportunity to create almost like a porch here that we think could be very exciting and a great space during the boat show and other times, and maybe a small community space that would have limited access, but could be great for hosting parties during those various types of events, and then shower and bathing facilities adjacent to that. So I'm going to go now to an enlarged plan of that. So this is what we're looking at on the ground floor of this structure, and using the best programming information we have to date, the idea of a small community room here that can open up to the outside, that may be somewhat glassy, that has a porch type structure attached to it. And then we have boater facilities that largely are made up of bathrooms, individual bathrooms of showers and toilets, as well as individual toilet rooms that could be accessed more easily on the outside. There's also a small laundry component that we're looking at as well. And then, as I mentioned, we think the Park Service would have some programming within this main structure, this addition, which could be a 1-story or 2-story building. That part is unknown yet. At the moment, the original Burtis building here, which at the moment is commissioned and approved for kind of a mothballing, really being raised up to that elevation 7. And it won't be renovated into a future phase. So on the second level of the building, I see we've labeled it first floor. It's like we're in Europe or something. But the Harbor Master facility will be on the upper level, and it's a relatively large space for them, at about 1,200 square feet total, although that probably includes the stair that we need for egress. The entrance to the building and for the upper level will kind of be in the middle here, where we can access an elevator for access and get over to the upper level where the Harbor Master is, and to the second level of the Burtis house. So there's a lot we don't know yet about the programming of these buildings, but we're making a lot of headway, and we're excited about that. So we've done some preliminary sketches and thinking about the heights of the building, trying to keep the lowest profile possible here. As you can see in these section views, this upper section is really cut through that Harbor Master facility on the upper level, with the boater facilities on the lower level. And you can see the existing wooden bulkhead promenade and the water level itself. And then down below, you see something of these 3 structures, which is the Harbor Master Boaters facility here on the right, and this alleyway access that we're proposing through the building, and then the Burtis structure here. We're also proposing that there would be a pocket park at the end of Prince George Street, which I think would be a fantastic addition here, and something had been proposed in the feasibility study for Burtis. And so we're very excited about that. Obviously, we think about view corridors here and the view shed to the water. This would be Dock Street with this very preliminary design at the moment, but in a 3-dimensional model. I just wanted to share with you, some of the heights that we'd be looking at. So on the far right here would be the pump house building, the park further to the right, and then just a very rough massing of, because we haven't designed this yet, but to get a sense of a 2-story building there at the end of Dock Street. And then looking kind of towards the bay from the park event lawn itself, with that addition to Burtis here on the left. So that gives you, some idea of what we're proposing for that structure. There is a lot to be still to be programmed, to be thought about. We're always considering alternatives, but we thought this was a lot to share with you today. These are fresh off the press. Even the package we sent you before did not have all this. I apologize for that. But we're anxious to get your comments and your feedback, and to work with you on these next steps while we're in this pre-application phase of the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bryce. Any other parts of the presentation that you guys want to cover? Or are you pretty much done with the formal part of the presentation?
I think that covers the formal part of the presentation. And I will just say that, and I wanted to roll back to kind of this overall comprehensive plan, because I think it really does give us a new vision for what can happen here. I'm very excited about this this document, about the opportunity here. So I want to just leave it on this for the moment so that folks can get the idea of the comprehensive nature of this, the flood proofing around the Ego Alley, the event lawn, Susan Campbell Park, and the Wooner, which we like to call it at Dock Street. And so I'll just leave it there, and we're ready for feedback and questions.
Okay, great. So I'm before we get into any detailed questions from both commission members, I just wanted to leave you with a very general impression that I have, and it's just something that sort of struck me, having traveled a bit recently into some places that have really nice public parks. I've been in a variety of places that just have some really nice public spaces. And the thing that struck me most about those spaces, and it's been in San Diego, places in Florida, South Florida, is that those parks bring a lot of local people to them. And they seem to be very well loved and very well used by people who are just sort of going about their daily business. And these are not necessarily tourists. You can really tell they're people that live there and are really use them and love them. And just a really sort of visceral impression that I got here is that while I think I like what I see here, the impression that I get very much is that it's really focused around special events. And we'll just leave it at special events, whether they're for locals or out of towners. I look at all of what you've shown and say it's awesome. But the question that I have is, what's here that's going to get somebody who lives in any neighborhood in the city to want to go down there and just hang out? So I don't really need an answer to that necessarily. I just wanted to leave you with that impression.
Alex, the comment you've made is the challenge we have right now. We have several months to resolve the challenge, but it's what the legacy team is struggling with. On the one hand, you want to tell a story that people will come from far and wide to see. Is that what you want? Or do you want a place where people in parole can bring their kids and enjoy the water? So that's, I think what you've just said is really the big issue for the community, the Planning Commission, the HPC, for us to resolve as we go forward with the design. I think it's our major challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to just sort of relay, that impression that I had. So what I like the idea that we can go around, and I appreciate Will has his hand up, and so I was going to mention that I think because we have such a large group, let's try to do the hand raising thing, because I think that will work well. And so, Will, do you have a comment that dovetails onto anything I said, or before we sort of go around the horn?
I want to comment to the point that you made. And I want to begin by making two sort of prefatory brief statements. One, I'm very impressed by the thoughtfulness and the excellence of the design elements of what you've presented. I wasn't able to attend the first meeting. I'm glad to see that you've been responsive to some of the concerns that were raised at that time. And secondly, it's ironic perhaps that I was in San Diego either a few days before or after Alex was. And I know Alex, at least his thoughts about development and smart towns and smart streets and thus and such, and I'm very impressed in line with those thoughts of his. But having just been to a similar place and to Oahu before San Diego, I was struck by how inviting the design, in my opinion, is to anyone, a resident or a tourist. And while I'm not disagreeing with Alex at all, I want to make the point that different people are going to react to this plan in very different ways, depending on their own experiences, desires, and hopes for, what this space can be for the city. So I understand what Alex is saying, but having just been in at least one of the places he referenced, I see this as much more like San Diego and how intense but open and pleasant their waterfront is. So just sharing another opinion. But overall, I really am impressed by what I've seen this evening.
Great, thanks. Well, let's, I have some other questions that I'll wait my turn later, but let's maybe go around. But Tim, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think, again, I want to echo the progress here. I think this is a lot of progress in several months, and you've clearly been doing a lot of work, and it generally is very positive. I have an idea. If we could walk through again each of the slides, and then I had thoughts on each or one of them that I would help. It would be helpful to just start at the beginning and just step through slowly. Not too slow. No, actually, we don't need to go back there.
Yeah, more on the design element.
Yes.
Slides, yeah.
I'll be really silly, but you don't have sails up when you're in slips, so you don't need to do that so much. As a sailor, every time I see that, don't do that. Anyway, so if we does it make sense, Alex?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And we just step through, and then we raise our hand or whatever if we have comments, or just jump in.
And this slide, of course, speaks mostly to sequencing and just labeling of various areas we're working on.
Just a quick comment back there. I'm so picky. On this particular slide, G is the older design with the parking spaces along. And so I want to just raise the question, is your proposal now is that parking goes away?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Scott, what's that? Well, in this, we are modifying the edge at V3, of course, but the diagonal parking there remains.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
He's talking about Z, I think.
I'm talking about G in front of the latitude 38, in front of the Phillips.
I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Yeah, that parking goes away, is the proposal.
Right. The parking, what Bryce was talking about, is to the left. That
I there are two G's. Yeah. Okay.
remains.
Okay.
From that.
Tim, do you want comments on that?
Bob, you mean on the Dock Street parking thing, or?
Yeah.
Oh, there's actually a more detailed slide. Why don't we wait? Because I wanted to make a few comments too. So, yeah, let's go to the next one.
Still an overview. That's fine.
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
And then we get into
this was a great response, I think. Thank you to, at least from it. If I'll quickly comment, and I see Bobby's got her hand up. I think you heard us. If you go back one slide, so the only place we have this solid glass wall is in front of Donner Park, and it seems to be less intrusive because of the panel and the new concept of these flip up barriers that don't require excavation, which I remember was a problem last time. So that seems to have been a positive step forward. So Alex, I'm taking over. Bobby's got her hand up.
That's fine. Go ahead, Bob.
I was just asking why we still have that glass wall there, why we haven't moved that area in front of Donner Park as well to the other either flip up or other type of wall. Is it not possible there, or?
It's the height that we'd have to get to. It would be and we thought that having the brick wall there is a good way to hone it. It makes it, I think, safer for folks that you could let kids run around in that park and they would have the edge there, not run into traffic. We kind of like the low brick wall, and then just adding that. You can't do the flip up on a narrow brick wall. You need the dimension. You see how wide the bulkhead is? That's why we can do the flip up there, because it's a very wide bulkhead. It's a very wide profile. Whereas Donner, it's just a thin brick wall.
So it's
And is that area that's labeled Donner Park there, is that also necessary, or is that just a design choice?
That's just a design choice.
yeah, that's kind of that's a Bobby, I think I'm reading your mind. That big block there that says Donner Park is just another object that blocks view.
Yeah.
It does maybe it hides the electrical box, but
Yeah, that is to scale that electrical box.
I know.
So it's
Don't add.
we were thinking we were doing you a favor by trying to screen
No,
that.
I wouldn't say so.
Yeah.
But to Bobby's point, you could actually have a wider wall there and have the flip up as well as an option.
Yes.
Just trying to understand why all the choices were made so I can kind of understand the big picture.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do a wider wall and then have a flip up on it, but it's I think this is. Go ahead.
Have you, I mean, what's your thought, and maybe this is more question for the city folks, what your thoughts on the chances of the rest of the essentially the folks at 110 Compromise Street sort of being interested in participating? So that's in the responses to questions that you sent to us, and thank you for doing that. I don't know if hopefully all the HPC folks have gotten that response to questions.
Thank you.
Good. So, one of the things that was the question is, why does the wall stay out along Compromise Street and not follow the water? And that's to some issues with 110 Compromise Street and responses from them. But do you guys have a sense for whether that's likely to change, or in the time frame that we would need it to affect any of this? Maybe not a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
David Gerald really may need to respond to that.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, David.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, this is Ivan here. I'm having some problems with a video, but I thought I'd give it a shot to answer, and that is, I think we mentioned this last time as well, that we'd have to continue the flood barrier on the water side for quite a distance going down, and you'd also, in that case, be the city would also be dependent on potentially private property owners, both when it comes to upkeep and then deployment of various flood protections on the water side. So that could definitely be done. This doesn't cut off that possibility, but provides some redundancy and security, and providing a flood barrier that would protect at least most of the city dock area in the base case. And then it's when it comes to kind of the thinner brick wall and glass on top versus the other type of flood barriers, an element here is also going to be related to cost and optimizing
Yes.
cost across the entirety of the project. So, and the shorter or the narrower brick wall is definitely a more cost-effective solution, and in this case also provide some more park space there compared to what a deeper wall would as well. So we're trying to balance kind of all these different aspects.
Okay, that's fair.
I think we can move on, but if in your eventual presentation, it will be helpful to have the pedestrian point of view as you walk from 110 Compromise towards City Dock, and the views that you're going to have towards the rest of the harbor and the dome of the Naval Academy, which is what you see as you're walking as a pedestrian. So those types of views, pedestrian views, are going to really be helpful in the final presentation.
Okay.
You picked a really good one here. That was awful. No, it's the other direction. I'm saying not across, but actually, the other direction. As you know, so I'm talking about pedestrian views. I'm talking about towards City Dock, towards the Market House, and that's what this will have an intrusion on, and that's what we will be looking at more closely. Thanks.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
I'm not impressed by the bench there. It looks uncomfortable, and it doesn't look all that useful. Visually from the top here, sort of fits, and it mimics their whatever, it mimics or embraces the fountain area, but I'm not so sure of its usefulness. And I would like to think of grandparents, watching children and so forth, parents, and the kind of benching that is in place all throughout here. Just kind of this is an element that could, all of those elements, the benching elements could say something, and maybe provide a theme or in some ways. Harkens back to colonial and yet is modern. I don't know. I mean, I think that those are decisions to be made later down the line. But at this particular place, I think it would be nice to have a place with some shade, but to have some benches that are actually a bit more useful, and more of them. And I think that you could take that space and make a virtual semicircle, or something else that would work for people.
I think we haven't really gotten to the all the site furniture yet. But I hear you. I agree. I know that having elderly parents, they need arms to get up from a bench.
Right.
So I totally am with you on that. I will say though that these platforms are actually hugely popular with little kids. They jump on them, they run on them. They have everywhere we've used something like that, they've been really popular. But
all right, that's interesting.
Oh yeah, I can attest to that. I think it's a design decision. We have Victor Stanley is kind of the standard black furniture we see around downtown right now, and I think you're introducing a new concept here, which I think is fine. It looks very slick, and it's its own space. And so I think, I don't know about other commissioners from a design point of view, but the materials just need to be appropriate. But I think, there's many options on how you can do this, and that's probably farther down the line. I just wanted to go back to one other thing. The pink arrows that you have on some of these drawings, yeah, like that one and the prior one, there was a reference made earlier, the quote unquote, and I'm sorry I interrupted, but those were view shed of some sort, views.
Yes. And prior that, it's a cone, so that's what the view is. So that image
out.
Is looking out. Is that image up on the right?
Thank you. Just remember, the opposite view is also a view from the water and back up into town is as equally important. So I almost read it the other way, frankly.
Yeah. You're right. I mean,
and any of your
arrows, I always get them mixed up myself.
Well, just remember, I mean, that any of the future, anything else looking back from up, anything we put in this space looking back up towards Main Street and Market House will be equally important.
Scott, is there any possibility there's a little planted strip between the Fountain Plaza and the ramp up? Is there any possibility using, yes, is there any possibility using that for further benching or for shade?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have trees in there, so they maybe don't show up, but there are 2 trees in there for shade and a third on the next planter up.
Okay,
But,
and there to the right where it's 6.5.
Yes.
Once again, is that large? Is that size necessary? Could some of that once again be devoted to more sort of benching and shading? Possibly.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I mean, we can all those walls we could be, sittable, but we could also put benches in front of them, and we could put benches out in that space. So yeah, I mean, definitely we can add a lot. We haven't gotten there yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make it as much as possible a really active, but very comfortable kind of a place.
Sure.
As possible. Because it's a great idea. I mean, this is, you're really getting there. Could I make just one silly, hopefully unnecessary comment? There's a lot of concrete here, some of which is going to get flooded, and it's going to be algae and stuff on it. And I'm planning for some hose bibs to clean this stuff off afterwards.
Power washing.
Yeah. Yes. And I have a question about these walls. Could you explain why you want to use the hydraulic walls and not the walls that are lifted by the rising water? What's your thinking?
It's the one that rises up by water has to have that large wiper wall. If we go back to that, it's as tall as the wall is, that's how wide the wiper wall has to be.
So it adds an element.
No, it's
The
the other
passive
direction.
one adds an element. Is that correct? If I understand?
Yes, we'll have to have them, and we're trying to avoid them, frankly, because so that middle left photo, see how wide those are? I mean, they're narrow but wide. That's because the flip up has to be that. You need that entire dimension for the buoyant ones to work. The hydraulic ones, you can get away with just having one when it's totally up, because it just goes up, and once you put it up, all you need is a stanchion, the width of the wall. So like a 8x8 post, as opposed to 4 feet long by 8 inches kind of thing. Does that make sense?
These end up looking so.
Alex, who makes the decision? I mean, how is this thing raised? Is it raised automatically, or does some guy have to flip a switch?
That's a Drew. Is Drew on the line? He knows.
Yeah, the hydraulic is deployed by a button or some manual means, whereas the passive is lifts by buoyancy. So as the waters rise, it rises.
I mean, I don't want to stick my nose too much into this decision, but I recall the very first time we met that somebody mentioned that there was Georgetown got flooded badly because somebody failed to flip a switch. And I just wonder what tuck it in your back pocket. I'm worried that there'll be some guy who's, on the other side of town and the waters are rising.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and that was I believe a manually deployed wall where you had to do a fair bit of manual labor to stack effectively a gate. So the hydraulic ones can, as Drew mentioned, either be switches, and also sensors can be put in place at this point so that they're triggered when certain events happen or certain water levels rise above a certain point. But yes, it's a redundancy in systems is very important in kind of achieving one of the key goals here, and that is to provide flood protection.
Yeah. Okay. Well, things have come along since those Georgetown days, huh?
Will, you have a question?
Yeah, a kind of a global question related to all of these walls and water barriers. They're clearly a concern for the whole project and a concern to both commissions. And my overarching question, I hope, is how much of the height at which you're designing the maximum elevation of the retaining features is driven by federal, state, or local requirements, and how much of it is driven by more of a design concern, you know, how to make it consistent, how to make it meet the requests that are being made by participants in the overall design process.
I mean, I think I can answer that to some extent. It really began in trying to match what the Naval Academy is doing, which is based on federal guidelines. You know, I'm also convinced that no one knows exactly how high we should be protecting, but our intent was to match what the Naval Academy was doing. We know that the last hurricane was at approximately elevation 5, just over 5, if not 6. So we know we've got to get over that.
Yeah.
As well. So 8 is the magic number.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thanks, Bryce.
Yeah.
This is David D. This is David D. I do need to point out, Bryce, the Naval Academy is a little bit higher than what City Dock is because they are directly on the water on that side and have more of a buildup, I guess. So our target elevation is 8, and I think we presented that at the first meeting. The Navy Academy is a little bit higher. Yes,
about 8.5.
And with regards to standards, this is currently a fairly new and evolving field. So we don't have the kind of typical kind of federal, state, and local standards when it comes to like the deployable flood barriers and things of that nature and kind of design height. So what we're very much driven by as Bryce and David mentioned is kind of the adjacent properties, future projected sea level and storm intensity, and then kind of triangulating out based on a design life. So we're depending upon how far into the future you want to project, the higher naturally you'd have to the higher a flood wall you would need. So we're looking towards the 2050 timeline as the base timeline that we'd be designing to. And one of the things that we are kind of you'll see throughout is kind of fixed components being up to 8, flexible components starting at a lower height and meeting 8. That provides also some future redundancy and flexibility to add on top if needed, or to do staged kind of a staged build out if required here for either budget purposes or sequencing. Or so we're trying to keep kind of that flexibility in mind kind of throughout the entire project.
David D. Once again, what we showed you at the last HPC working session meeting with the PC. For 2020, our record flood event was at elevation 6.43, the 2003 Hurricane Isabel, and we showed you that slide. And then we showed you the 2050 design, where we were basically showing you where that was with a 8-foot flood wall height, and our where'd it go? Our 2050 1% annual chance of being exceeded was at 7.81. So that's why our elevation protection is up to elevation 8.
Thank you. That was very helpful to me in thinking about this.
Yeah, but just we did show you those slides the last presentation, and I'd show you them again if I could share my screen, but we'll put that in the meeting minutes.
Okay. And while we're on the walls, this is really a comment for the city and Mr. Gerald that, and one of the things that we saw in the responses were the response to my question about maintenance, and you know, that it was going to require probably twice yearly maintenance. So one of the things that I would hope to expect to see in the city budget in the coming years is a line item for that maintenance. So that's something, because the value of all of this goes way down if we don't maintain it. So we definitely want to see that in the city budget in the future years.
I would just add, sorry, Alex. I would just add
Okay.
that it's twice a year is what they recommend exercising the barriers. So it would just be a matter of deploying them just to and inspecting just to make sure nothing's wrong. It's not as if they're doing any sort of serious work to them twice a year.
Okay, well, whatever the routine maintenance schedule ends up being, we would expect to see money allocated to do that. Okay, so I guess Tim or John?
Yeah, just a very quick clarifying question. I noticed in one of the early slides, there was a reference to military installation resilience plan, which is I hadn't heard that before. So I assume that you as a team are working with the Naval Academy, because none of this works if the water just comes right down Randall Street into the city. So is that military installation resilience team who you're working with in terms of their plans for the edges of the dock? I don't know who can answer that question.
I'm not sure where that was on the slide, but
That was part of Lashinsky's comprehensive plan.
Thank you. So thanks, Teresa. Yeah, so first time I saw that, I'm glad to see it. So
the short answer, yes, we've had several meetings with them already, and we will have to integrate towards kind of gate zero, for lack of a better term, and make sure that not only the flood protection on that side, but also when it comes to general stormwater on that side is accounted for.
Yeah, it should be pretty straightforward. Gate 0, gate 1, gate 3. So they have lots of walls.
John, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say I'm so pleased to see this iteration of the design. I've seen it develop over the last year and a half, and this is really the best version. Very thoughtful. I had a few things I wanted to ask. The first is, which of these flood barriers is the most easily modified for, let's say, future, if we wanted to raise the flood mitigation level? And it seemed like the bolt-in glass is the easiest of all of them to modify, just looking at the different designs.
That's what I was going to suggest, is the glass wall would be the easiest to extend. I don't know if Drew or David may have other thoughts, but
I would say that's pretty definitive. Yeah.
Okay. Next thing, it hasn't necessarily been mentioned, but I did get a demonstration of the passive vertical barrier at the National Archives, and it was the most simple and elegant device. And even though the equipment that they had in place, I guess, was maybe 15 years old, they've never had a problem with it. It deploys silently. It's relatively safe going up and coming down. It was just amazing. It was as simple and effective as a bicycle. So next thing, this is a little rain on the parade. If we are relying on 110 Compromise Street as part of our flood barrier, it needs to be stated that I think the floor there is only at 5. And that means that we would be relying on glass and their brick wall to be the flood barrier above level 5. So that's, and and frankly, I don't know how flood-proof their foundation is either. Just something we need to look into moving forward. Okay, and here's the big one. When I saw the stage, I thought it was fantastic, but I also thought, what about the possibility of rotating it so that it is more in line with the pump house and the boater facility? Just a thought. So you keep the view a little more open.
You lose the.
Maybe we'll get to that as we step through all of the drawing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that's it. Okay. So I'm stepping back.
Don't jump the gun, John.
Anything more on flood barriers at the moment? But I agree with John. I think that vertical barrier, it really is elegant in a lot of ways because it's working with the water and does not rely on the mechanics that the others do. It's also, I think it's somewhat more expensive. I don't know if Drew has any comparable numbers on that, but
Yeah, it is more expensive, installation wise, especially. But I mean, it does work passively, but there's also the passive option for that flip up barrier as well. It just requires the wider wiper wall, like Scott was explaining.
Maybe we should go to that flood barrier diagram because the flood barrier strategy doesn't depend on 110, although it's not shown here. It's somehow it crosses the street. Is that?
yeah, it does, because otherwise it's just going to come in the back door. Even if we connected to 110 Compromise, it would come in the back door on Compromise Street.
That's correct. So it would require a flip up barrier across Compromise, going towards the school, which is at higher elevation.
Will you start reflecting that in subsequent presentations or?
Yes, absolutely. I think that we had that a little bit more pulled out on the last one. I think we're focusing more on the other aspects tonight, but yes, we will make sure that that's included more clearly on the next presentation.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one. So I did have one comment about the architecture of this building. I think it looks nice, and it's definitely a contemporary kind of thing. We see a lot of that in the stuff in West Annapolis and in other places. The question that I have is, how is that going to age? In 20 years, are we going to look at this building and say, that's so 2022? Just a question, not saying that it should look colonial or something. I mean, I'm not an architect. I'm just always I always wonder, if something is sort of hip today, is it going to be hip in 20 years? So just a general question.
And while you're answering, it just looks like we have 3 walkways side by side here. It just looks like walkway after walkway after walkway. If you could roll in why that's like that as well.
Yeah, good comments. It could be that we could eliminate the steps and require people to use the ramp, possibly. We've got some grading issues that we have to solve. We might be able to eliminate a few square feet of concrete or paving for sure. if we did that. At some point, we flipped this and put the toilets on the left of this building. And since we've done that, we may not have refined the paving design yet. So that's something we'll certainly look at. I think we all want as little pavement as possible. In terms of the design, I think the way that we can best future-proof buildings to some extent is to keep them simple, to use natural materials where possible. And I think, probably maintenance becomes, the most important thing for a structure like this. But I think it's important that it be warm and welcoming while modern. And, that's something that I truly believe makes things fit in the best. I think the Savannah waterfront is a great example of some very new structures that have been built that are very contemporary in their nature, but they also use a lot of natural materials, including wood. So I think the best approach that we can do is keep it simple, keep it open as much as possible. I think it could be very flexible for that reason. And these are products that have a long life.
I think Ben Sales' comment, by the way, was very apt. He noticed that you have that stairwell and the ramp, and I'm just trying to think of, what kind of useful community space can be made out of that.
Yeah, and I think if we look at one of these other views, this one doesn't necessarily show it, nor does this one, but this one does. So that, if we made that ramp come up, we've got some grade issues we've got to resolve there. You can see the steps here in the middle. We'd have to be able to ramp into the building, and I think we can do it, quite frankly. If all the moving pieces stop moving, we can connect them with less paved area. I think we all agree. I think it's a great comment too.
And then off to the right, where the woman in the red shirt is heading, off to the right there in that corner, that could become a much more useful space, more seating. Yeah, could be
right, so something to note here. Remember, the ramp is meant both for ADA access up to the plaza, but also for vehicles to get up to the plaza. So we need that ramp.
No, you want the ramp. It's maybe we can get rid of the stairs.
Yeah.
Okay. What I was going to say is that the wet well actually comes all the way out to those stairs, and we're paving over a portion of the wet well there that comes out past the restrooms to the south toward this interactive fountain. So this was a way that we could kind of use more of that land for circulation. We can't really get rid of either one of those things, I don't think. I mean, we could study it, but that's the current design. We probably need these wood planks to come a little further out over toward all the way to the planter. So that's something to look at.
I think it's also important to make sure that direct routes are maintained for people that could take them, say, up the stairs, and not make somebody walk 3 times as far just on the ramp. So definitely keep that in mind.
We will definitely explore that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Tim, you have a comment?
Try and find my mute button. One or two comments. When we look at this drawing and the prior drawing, and one more even, as you approach this space from the market, these large blank areas of concrete wall are going to be important to articulate a little more. I think right now, I know it's preliminary, but there's a lot of blank concrete right now, and I know it's early, but so I think just breaking those down, I'm not saying you need to make them brick or anything, but I think a lot more thought needs to go into that from a landscape design point of view.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then the height and bulk of this building is interesting. From this side, it's quite big. I think it'll be helpful in your eventual presentation to compare it to what's there now, which is, I think, taller. So so you're actually, it looks, oh my gosh, a big new building, but when you present it, you want to compare it, I think, to that. And as far as future-proofing design, good luck. I just returned from Columbus, Indiana, where brutalism is pretty important. So this is not a brutalist building. And materials are going to be important. It's unpainted. It's obviously a current building, and we're not thinking that you should make it look anything but current. The guidelines would tell us that, your context here is, I would say, pretty flexible, almost a blank slate. City dock has been wiped clean multiple times, and the adjacent buildings, I don't think except for the Burtis house, which we'll get to, I think, you have a lot of, this is my opinion as one commissioner. I'm not speaking for the rest of the commission, but referencing individual buildings is not going to be important, but referencing maybe the dock and its maritime history would be important. And I'm not sure this says anything about that. This could, unfortunately, my comment is this building could be anywhere. So it's lovely, but I would try to make it reference something local. So again, just one commissioner.
Very gently said, Mr. Leahy.
Teresa, go ahead.
Two comments. I think first, the point about a lot of white space. I recognize, again, this is still preliminary and the aesthetics of the view from the concrete walls and so on. But there are a lot of things that could be considered when we get community involvement at some point. Like Jack London Square in Oakland has very large, concrete walls as well, but they've utilized them in community created tiles. They were created by the community. They've sit there for 30, 40 years. And there's some decorative type of things that can soften the view there. My other question is about this building as far as the rooftop is concerned. It seems that because the building's so small, and I'm not sure what kind of roofing we're using, but is there a potential for any kind of roof deck, seating area up on top, something that would expand the view, for at least people that are visiting the area? Or is it limited?
Great question. We actually had proposed that originally here. The challenge with that is providing elevator access to it so that we can have equal opportunity access. And it just gets a little uncontrollable when we do that, I think. Especially as the amount of equipment we have in here is much greater than we originally thought. So that's been the challenge. And so we've kind of gone to towards the direction of making it as low as possible. The building's only about 13.5 feet tall, even though on this side, because you get the additional 7 feet up to the floor level, it feels greater. We would love to do a rooftop here in a lot of ways, but I think it's going to make the building bigger because of the stairs and elevator that it requires and the view shed impact.
Why do you not
The
bring
blank? I just wanted the blank walls, and it's a great idea about community tiles. We've got a lot of opportunity here, and the legacy committee. This is one of the things that we're looking at with them is all kinds of interesting messaging and/or textures and opportunities for the community here and to tell a story and. Without it getting out of control, but in some really sensitive ways. So we're exploring that. And these are exactly the types of things we're showing them.
And one last point about seating. So it looks like for the most part, we're doing traditional seating, right? So steps that can be used as seating areas or just plain benches. I was in Boston last week, and one of the things that was really an attractor, to the area there on the Greenway was these simple swings. It was these bench swings, that just kind of swing, and there was only about maybe a handful of them, but they were completely used, and people were coming strictly to sit on the swing and watch their children play in the water area. So I just think it's something to consider, just some creative, attractions or amenities in that way.
We've actually shown those in previous iterations. We had precedent imagery. So yeah, we're with you on that 100%.
Well,
yeah, thank
Can I
you.
just, why is the building on 3 sides not pulled right to the pavement or the sidewalk? Why those little planting strips? Yeah, why that little planting strip? What does that do?
I think it maybe softens the approach of the building. There is what we were looking for. The sidewalk could be bigger. Unfortunately, the building can't spill out with seating along there to take advantage of that larger sidewalk. I know we've got a ways to go here in terms of thinking about some buses and other things. So, and I would also defer to the landscape architect.
Okay. Thanks, Bryce.
I mean, well, as you can see, we were hoping to have some vines growing up the side of the building too, and more than anything, which I think we're getting much better at doing. I'm seeing it really successfully done. 20 years ago, it seemed like we could never pull that off. Now it seems we're getting better. But that would be my comment, and it could be less of a green strip.
I do think it's sort of a when you look at it holistically, we've got these linear planters like you have where at the top of the ramp there, and I think I envision it's going to be a simple planting, not unlike what's shown, probably just a simple native grass maybe, but that it is sort of a just pulls you off enough from the building, gives us enough space to do the vines and gives us enough soil space and softens the edge there. But certainly it could be narrower.
Alex?
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Thanks. I'd like to sort of try to pull together 2 of the comments that have been made that I think are very important. And one of them was to say that I agree with what Tim was saying about our guidelines don't allow us to approve buildings that have a false sense of history. And also to connect that to what you were saying, Alex, about a concern for how these buildings might appear to the users and to the citizens 20 or 30 years down the road. And I think the answer here is we should be looking for the highest quality design that we can afford and meets all of our sort of technical and environmental requirements. And I say that keeping in mind that the Georgian architecture that we're all so proud of having here was, of course, 100 years later, thought to be old-fashioned, out of date. People were tearing it all down to do something quote unquote modern. But I believe that part of the reason that it survived for us to admire and to share with the world is because it was so excellent. It was excellent design. The aesthetic quality was superior. In Annapolis, we were fortunate to have history and economy, the economic history of America kind of leave us behind. And so it left us more undisturbed. But the bottom line is that was the best quality that could be produced in the environment at that time. And if we keep that as our goal to do the best that we can aesthetically and in terms of practical service and those needs, we'll have something that we'll be proud of if we're fortunate to live 20 or 30 years.
Good point. Thanks. David?
Yeah, hi. I'd like to touch on what you said earlier about who is this for? Is it for local or is it for, the bigger communities, like for concerts and that sort of thing? I got to tell you, I'm not that impressed with the design of it just being these big rectangular fields. I'm not sure how much people are going to be using the concert area when there's not a concert going on there. I see people bring their dogs there, of course. and the issues with that. I don't see people playing Frisbee there or doing anything else there at all. Just like they don't do at the concert fields at Quiet Waters Park. You never see anybody there unless it's a concert. So I'm a little bit concerned of, I think about the waterfront park in San Diego. That's an interesting looking park. It's not just another square prison yard, green grass, square, rectangle. I think there could be a lot more done creatively there, that we could still have seating for concerts, but also make it a little more interesting and more inviting to people to come to that area. So, and I think that Ms. Rubio Dorsey has some good ideas as well on that aspect. I'm also a little bit concerned about what you mean by tilting the concert stage. I'm hoping you don't mean to have the concert face the water by any means, because that causes a lot of issues in itself with noise and actual just general physics. You don't need anything else to increase the noise over the water. So I hope that it's not even in consideration. And that's all I have to say at this point.
Thanks. Ben?
Yes, and to piggyback on Dave's comments with an extra, the grass at Susan Campbell Park, that place gets used a lot, especially during the summertime. I don't see grass really being able to survive well out there. And when they do currently have events out there like the Hooli, whatnot, they completely cover that. They use the bottom pavement as the bottom for the tents and everything. So obviously that would go away. You'd be down to having to lay a floor or something else. I just don't see the grass really staying alive at Susan Campbell Park if they plan to have a lot of events out there. I guess it's always worth a shot. You could always pave it later, but a comment.
I'm sorry, who was that spoke?
And Sale, Planning Commission.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Those questions of longevity of the grass are always an issue because the grass generally requires a lot of maintenance. But anyway, okay, so can we go on to the next? And we go next. So maybe the next kind of theme. But you have questions on those?
Yeah, I raised my hand real quick. I think right now the planting of the large, what you're depicting as relatively large trees, is important to think in more detail. Again, I know this is early, I'm just trying to guide you. Right now they're just lined up. I think you're going to need to be trading off shade on blocking views. Right now, the view is to the water and from the water back to town. So it's a conversation we can have, I think, and I'd love to get more public input as to the amount of large trees that you intend here, as opposed to smaller things that don't actually obscure the views. As you can tell, I'm kind of beating the same horse. The views to the water and from the water are going to be super important.
Tim, this is Eileen. If I could just add what we're seeing in the different meetings I have been in, these are more planning meetings with other communities as well as the Park Service today, is because of the just tremendous increase in heat. Many communities are looking at really trying to provide some serious shade, because nobody is going to use spaces like this in July and August in 100-degree heat. And there are a variety of things that can be done, misting and other things, but I think that we are looking at a point in time where we're going to have to balance these issues, and there's going to have to be shade out here.
I completely agree. I'm kind of just saying that right now the design is kind of is generically all these same height trees and extending out. I think just I'd be conscious of the view sheds and just use them wisely. I think so. Again, just staying early days, and I understand what you're saying about especially the heat that builds up here. And we certainly don't want it just to be a paved area with no trees. I'm not proposing that. I'm just looking at this one drawing here. seeing.
Yeah, I might just say that often it's kind of, we run into, blocking views with retail all the time, and everybody says, oh, you should use smaller trees. And in fact, if you look at the crepe myrtles, for example, that are at the end of the dinghy dock, they actually are more in your eye because they're lower than if we used a willow oak, for example. They get, you see under them, and you get pure views. So we're very cognizant of that, and I think that's I hear you, but I also hear that, we just did the Inner Harbor in Baltimore as well, and the biggest number one in all the community engagement meetings was we need shade, shade, shade.
Yeah. And some of these trees grow over 50 years. Some of them grow over 5 years. Great myrtle grows over 5 years.
This is true.
So again,
one other thing that when I was with the Park Service today, that a couple communities were talking about with putting in misting apparatus. I don't know if that's the right term, but because it's become, and these communities were from Southern Virginia, it's become such an issue.
Yeah. Well, that can be part of the sculpture. The sculpture could be a huge mister.
It's a good idea.
And I don't know what the sculpture concept is. Obviously, also a feature, but it doesn't block a view necessarily, but it's also completely reversible. Whereas a tree is not really reversible. So that's another aspect of what we generally look at in terms of reversibility. So
yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I have a follow-up question that I just got an idea on the flood walls whenever we get back to that. Is there another slide later we'll talk about flood walls again and their protection? Or I'll just throw it in there right now. If we come to talk about it, yacht allowance inside of the harbor during a flood/wind event. Because if a yacht gets loose, all these flood walls, I'm not sure of their strength, but if a yacht gets loose from its moorings or not tied properly and gets blown into one of these moorings, or somebody decides to come down Ego Alley during a high water event just to take a look, and they take a little bit of a wide turn and tap one of those flood barriers, you'd have instant spillage and flooding in the city. So I guess, these flood barriers look great. I guess we would have to have in combination an operational plan that during high wind water events, you either have all the vessels vacate that area or buoy it off at the end so no travel. Just something to throw in the thought bank for future thoughts. Because I've seen this in New Orleans.
Yeah, fortunately,
through the barrier, right?
The flood barriers are set back generally from the bulkhead, but even that may not be enough when we get
if you had water that got up to within a foot of the glass high wall or whatnot, is it possible for a bow to come in and tap that and hit it if it got loose from a mooring? Or
I think the answer there is we don't have glass along the bulkhead now. The glass is only behind Donner Park, right?
So maybe I'm worried about nothing there then.
Well, no, it's just that we talked to the harbor master about the compromised street bulkhead, and that's why there's no mooring there, so that the boats can't tie up in that area. So we should be okay there. They'd just be turning around, and then everything else, the barriers are behind it.
Okay, so if the water was high and the pop-up barriers, let's say down at the bottom by the small dinghy dock, there's no way for a boat to get, even at very high water, close to that barricade to bump it and loosen it.
It would have to be pretty narrow due to, you'd see the wooden mooring ties there for dinghies would provide a bit of protection. I think the actual flood barrier that's the closest to the water with kind of a mechanism is a long compromised street, and on top of that concrete flood wall, but that's definitely something that will have to be evaluated, is just the strength of that flood wall and kind of having bumpers to catch. But we're at 5 feet, so there's an additional 3 feet, so depending upon the size of the boat, it could be it's an issue that we have to make sure that we have covered off as we move forward. So it's a very good point.
All right, thanks. That's it.
Could, Bryce, could you go back a few slides to the Dock Street, overhead? Yeah. First of all, congratulations to you and probably to the mayor's office and David Gerald and everybody else who says, yes, this should be a pedestrian walkway. And we've now gained incredibly valuable community space here. Congratulations. Great. And the little alley between the buildings is going to be useful for emergency access, for pedestrian access, and all of that is all going to make sense. It's going to be very useful, multi-useful kinds of spaces. Just a couple of observations. Have you ever thought about rounding some of the corners on some of these places where people walk around? I'm thinking down in sort of the lower right, where it's the edge of the event field, I think event lawn, you call it. I mean, it's a hard angle, you know, and also at the edge of the quote outdoor dining where it says, you know, I'm just throwing it out as one way of kind of softening some of the edges and things here and to make them kind of more inviting to walk along. I'm just tossing it out.
Yeah,
Scott.
I agree with the corners up. You know, that is a tough corner on the right by the dock there. The other one up at the outdoor dining, that's in the pavement. That's a flush curb. There's no elevation to that.
I think the way you're imagining this pedestrian walkway is great. I mean, I think this is going to be a really, really sexy place. So I'm very glad the way that you're thinking about it at both ends. I'm also super enthused that you're thinking about putting a street end park at the end of Prince George. As I said in the earlier meeting, I said there's tremendous opportunities to enliven Prince George Street and make it a really kind of, anyway, to enliven it. So I can't tell you how joyful I feel seeing this slide. That's all I have to say about it. I also thought, by the way, pump station, and you just sort of offhand said, well, maybe there's some room for some concession there. And I was just thinking, if the right concession is found, you know, it's like, I don't know, lemon shaved ice or something that becomes the trademark for what you get when you go to the Annapolis seafront. You know, that could be like, you know, the beignet and coffee in New Orleans. It's like the right concession at that place, and that little veranda could become a very, very active place. Without a concession, it's just a place to, I don't know, do what. So I would argue for thinking it as a really, you know, lively place and allowing a concession, but that's for down the line. Thanks. Nice going, Mr. Turner.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of good help, and you really helped us. You challenged us to think about this, and I think it's really helped. I think it's a wonderful location. Expanded the park.
You guys have been listening to a lot. It's really evident. It's really, it's great. It's getting real better and better.
I jumped for joy when I saw that too. Bobby, I think you were next.
This is kind of I want to make sure I understand something. When we looked at the early slide, I saw the Burtis House and the what they call boater facilities. They were together. There was not the Burtis House expansion. And in that iteration, you could look the length of Dock Street and see out to the water.
Right.
With this expansion that's happened with the Burtis House to make I guess it's the museum or whatever, you've now totally blocked that view.
Yes,
I agree.
And I have a concern that we're losing a really good view along the water there, both from the Dock Street perspective and from the water perspective. I totally understand the need for obviously the boater facilities, and I think the Burtis House is in a great location. I just wish there was a way to not have that new thing pushed out into the Dock Street area.
Well said.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of the things that we're gently trying to explore, and it is a challenge. You know, I will point out, if you look here on the left, that at Craig Street, the buildings do project further out.
Right.
So it's not like you have that view as wide as we would like from the Market House. And we're very aware of the built structures we're putting here do nothing but block some views, but we need them, of course. So we are looking at that, Bobby. We're definitely trying to make it as compact as possible. And we're trying to understand all the programming that needs to happen for the National Park Service and the Birdist House, and how all that can fit together. And we definitely are not there yet in terms of finalizing this. So we will certainly keep that in mind, because we all want the view shed to be as wide as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Teresa?
I have a question, because we've talked more about just overview and schematics, but I haven't seen anything from like an electrical plan or some facilities plan. And my question is more about the electrical facilities that exist or will exist in the pump station. Is there any plans to extend the availability of those facilities through Susan Campbell Park? I'm asking for more of, as this place becomes more active, we'll have more festivals, we'll have more vendors. And sometimes some of the limitations is, everyone's been to a festival with those constant, extension cords everywhere. And if this is being built out new, especially if we'll have sprinklers and so on in the grass area, will there be availability of electrical, use out in Susan Campbell Park as well?
Yeah, the answer is yes, of course. We're looking forward to getting to that stage where we can begin to really wire this, if you will. But I think Wi-Fi, obviously in-ground electric, Scott was showing earlier on some of the seating steps, how you can put in small devices that can be like tables. They can also have USB chargers in them. I saw some in Baltimore yesterday. So yeah, we're anxious to get to that stage. The good news is, since we're building up, we have a lot of room to be running conduit and anything else we need. And it's much easier to put it in now rather than try to add it later. So
exactly. Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, thanks. Just back to what Bobby's comment was, and then from Bryce's response, the National Park Service has been mentioned multiple times, and they're a welcome partner. We're thrilled, and Wendy O'Sullivan has been a part, I think, of these discussions all along, and we're really hopeful. I think everyone is aware of the potential for the National Recreation Area to be based in Annapolis. Wonderful thing. But the reason I bring it up is that's a new user, I guess, number one. But I understand that the city owns the building now, owns Birdist House, not the National Park Service, right? So I don't know what the future is in terms of leasing to that, but it does seem like the National Park Service programming needs are starting to expand the size of this building. Am I hearing that correctly? I guess that's for Bryce.
Yeah, we're finally really getting to the point now where we can have that conversation at a higher level. So I'm looking forward to that. And I think ultimately, as we put all of this stuff, meaning boater facilities and harbor master together, everybody's going to have to give a little something in order to make it all fit. And so I think it's certainly possible that the addition can get a little smaller. I also think that there may be an opportunity for us to expand left and right a little bit, so that we don't have to come any further towards the park, and hopefully can retreat from the park a little bit. So I don't know what else I can add. I think we're probably going to have to just outline the shell the way it needs to be, tighten it up further. And I think that way it'll be more clear what's available for the National Park Service.
Yeah. Again, this is early days, but eventually, I guess we're looking at maybe the next 6 months or so that their programming needs are going to become more obvious. And there is one drawing, to Bobby's point. There's a little drawing later that just brings us right straight home that this whole view is completely blocked, and reducing that. is going to be important. There you go.
Yeah.
That's a pretty dramatic change. So I think you're eventually going to need to make the case that there's a programming need that the community wants, and then we'll have the discussion. But we're not there yet.
Right. Is there any possibility of combining them and into a 3-story structure where it says Burtis House expansion?
That's a great point.
I mean, and then tuck it around the corner, you'd hardly notice it.
It would stay within the height district probably too.
I think staying in the height district would be challenging there. Because I think we're 28, 38 in that location. Yes. But yeah, we're certainly open to that. We'd like to explore that.
Yeah.
And be as creative as we can there.
And then we can have the rooftop deck on the 3rd floor on the water.
Yeah.
As long as there's not a bar on the top, it's okay.
Or music.
Or music. There's that sailboat ramming into the flood wall. Put your sail down, dude.
I started to make that comment as I saw that yesterday. It's like, I know some of these sailors on the commission are going to really bust our chops. that it would be flopping over and running into the bulkhead, right?
Yeah. Oh, this is another important one. Anyone have any thoughts about the stage structure here?
I think a signature thing, doesn't necessarily have to be decided in this process, but certainly many people over the years have said that's a point where something signature could be. And private funds raised for it, and a lot of talk about what it's going to be.
I like stages that go away after the concert's done and you get the view back, but or at least the vertical portion of it.
It could be a number of things. I remember there was a woman who ran for mayor once who proposed putting a replica of the Thomas Point Lighthouse there, and you could walk up and walk around and look through binoculars and so forth. And I mean, it's not the greatest
false sense of history.
The idea has been around for a long. Something to be done there.
I still like the Ferris wheel. I really do.
You what?
The Ferris wheel.
Ferris wheel. Ferris wheel. Tim, you surprise me every time.
Well, I'm getting older and more mellow. John had brought up, I want to go back to John's point. John thought of the idea of rotating this or having it more run in a different angle. I wanted to get back to John if he wanted to bring that up again.
And what are we looking at?
I'm thinking in terms of view sheds. This isn't really very intrusive. So, is this the best? Is this the best placement? Is if there's a concert, is sound going to reverberate the least from this position? I mean, there are a lot of things to consider here, but that was just a thought to put the pump house and that in line so you would have a more open view at the end of the city dock.
And to be clear, the end of the dock is right there with the structures, steel structure, right?
No, Ben.
No, it's got quite a distance. Yeah, it's another 30 feet, 40 feet maybe to the dock.
My only comment on this is that having the placement between, Susan Campbell and the docks, park, is that it breaks up the view. It actually breaks up. And so if you're watching a concert, your back will be to the water as you're looking at the stage if you're watching it from Susan Campbell. That's my only aesthetically. I think the theme or the primary vision should always be the view, right? Always facing the water. So that's just my thought, is that having it right smack in the middle, it just detracts from that just a little bit.
Well, just a thought, you could play toward or facing the market house, and the spectators, the concert goers, could be looking beyond the bend to the mouth of the Severn River. I didn't know which way the performance was going to be in it.
I was assuming that's the way it would be, and I think the idea was that it could face either way, really. But I think facing the band and the stage, if you will, from this perspective, you would see the water because you've got at least a 2-foot drop. You would have a decent view of the water, even though there may be a few heads down there. But I like that because we're raised up and we're looking kind of through the stage.
Yeah. I think the very introductory slide, there was a large sail kind of structure going on. That looks like that's going away, which I think is the move in the right direction. Yeah, because that would have been very. This is see through and then again reversible, and there are some interesting old pictures of City Dock to look at for this. It was an industrial place,
right?
Believe it or not. So referencing some of the industrial past of the dock and would be useful, and I think in the design here.
So Tim, should the pump house be a large fuel container?
I would love it. Yeah.
And to David's point, or I'm not sure it was Ben or David that mentioned, about having this concert area that doesn't necessarily retract, once concerts are over, with the appropriate lighting that can stay year round. I think it sometimes softens that to being more than just a concert venue when it's not being used.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, we see this as a place. It's not necessarily just. I mean, I don't get hung up on the concert thing because that was, it was just a way to say, we think it's a very public space, that the idea is that Annapolitans will come down here for events, whether they're concerts or they're dancing or they're, it's just
a gathering place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a gathering place. And so is the area underneath the trellis there. It's not meant to be, it's meant to be that. I think that's going to be a great place to sit and pull chairs up on. And it's, because you get great views from there because you are high up, as Bryce said. So I think you need to think of it more universal, that it really has a lot of uses, and
I think it's worth asking any concert promoter or anything like that, see what we're building would even be useful, because we may build something they never use and they still bring their own structures and put them up.
Right. And we could see Tai Chi classes out here, yoga classes.
Sure.
I mean, and the instructors up there and the people are on the lawn. I mean, it really isn't, it's meant to be a space for the town.
I think it clearly is meant to be a concert venue is what it looks like. It looks like that's what the intention is to be a concert venue.
Well,
and if that's being said, then if you want it to be a gathering space, then I think you can make it look a lot more interesting than just a grassy field with the stage at the end. That's all I'm saying. And
it needs to be shaded, Scott, in order to be useful during the day for 6 months. Yeah, it needs to be shaded. I don't know what the roof looks like. Is the sizing of it right? Is it does it need to be as wide in width? As the height and so forth. I think as you guys take a look at that and decide to whether what's the right size. But I agree with you that I think it could become if there are tables and chairs and removable, and of course all of this is programming and how that's paid for. But if there are movies, I could see taking my sandwich down there. I could see doing things like you're suggesting. I think that this could be a very useful, multi-purpose kind of a place. Yeah. You need to give it a name. It needs to have a little bit, you know what I mean? It needs to have a signature to it, but I think you're thinking right. Ben, I think it's going to go beyond just concerts.
Yeah, and if it was just concerts, probably just the center section would be enough.
Right.
Yeah.
But this could be the Waldman Pavilion with
There you go.
great benefactor, right?
Oh God.
Oh boy.
All kinds of stuff out there, Dave. You name it, it'll be out there. Weddings, parties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Loud all day, every day.
I will make one comment, and from a point of view, I think you're on the right track to make it quite simple, which it is clearly is. Looks like Mies van der Rohe designed it, but I think simplicity is important. The scale of thin. But I also agree it's a public pergola. It could be used for lots of things. So I think you're on kind of the right track here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go ahead, Bobby. You got a question or?
Just a real quick question, and maybe I'm not supposed to ask this, but I have to ask about our signature events every spring and fall, the boat show. Are these spaces going to be convertible to that craziness that becomes the boat show down there?
We have been working with the boat show. We haven't talked with them about, you're seeing these designs before anyone else, but we definitely have been working with them and are very clear about their basic needs. I think that's a fair statement, isn't it, Bryce?
Absolutely. I mean, the lawn is a very large, flexible, programmable space. And, we're trying to balance that with the need for it to be a place, with all the things we just said. But we've got a lot of space that's going to be available for them. And I'm sure they'll give us some more input, but they're going to have to work around us as well a little bit once we do this space. There's going to be a lot of space to work with, though.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying we should do anything for them, but just certainly kind of keeping that in our minds as we move forward, because it is such a signature event to Annapolis.
And we have laid out kind of the boat show on this as well, which might be interesting for us to bring to the next meeting.
Okay. Very cool.
Okay, are we getting close to the end of the slides, or
Yes.
where are we?
We're done.
I would like to go back. No, pardon me. Can we go back to your aerial view of the end of Ego Alley?
Aerial view.
Getting there.
There, that's good enough. That's good enough. And I'm going to hearken back to the discussion that was had earlier on between Alex Pline and Will Scott about, sort of what's the purpose of all of this? Is it for outsiders, tourists, events, Annapolitans, and all of that? And how do we make it kind of a living room for everybody, or the front porch? And one of the things is, the most active places is right there. This is where, everybody's got to go through somehow: walking, bicycling, car driving. We will never have a really first-class park area here at the end of Ego Alley, close to the center of everything, unless we get rid of the traffic circle. We get rid of the traffic circle.
I was waiting for it.
Yes, Bob. If you get rid of the traffic circle in the upper right where it says passive horizontal barriers, you have a sidewalk which is probably a third, at least, again, as big. You can have safe pedestrian crossings. Down here where the trees are in the green, you'll move it out at least a lane of traffic, and then you have a park that you guys can design for all kinds of stuff that goes on, naturally. I'm just saying, you want to make a living room, you have to get rid of that stupid circle. Pardon me.
Hallelujah.
Just so the team knows, I have had, what do you think, Bob, 50 conversations with you on this topic, where I say, Bob says this every time, and I say every time, it's not in their scope.
Yeah.
Eileen, we've had that conversation too.
I know.
I totally agree with Bob, though. Absolutely.
Yeah, I am 100% sincere. I agree with him 100%.
What's the resistance?
Well, it's not stupid. You can't use that word.
Pardon me. I withdrew that. Strike that from the transcript.
But there are interim solutions that doesn't have to be all or none, right? They can put bollards right there, at the entrance. Traffic,
There's all sorts of issues.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a different project. I think it's a different project, but actually, right? I think that's Eileen's point. It is not necessarily, but I think looking outside just at the edges of all of this is worthwhile from a planning point of view. And I don't think we should ignore that. The city, the plaza in front of the market is another one. And honestly, what's going on along Dock Street there with where Old Phillips is, that area is going to be redeveloped. And I know it's not in the scope of your project right now, but as that develops over the next few months or a year, I think I have a question, I guess, for Eileen. Have there been any discussions about that parcel? I know I'm opening up a new topic here late in the meeting, but that parcel where latitude 38 is, and there's 3 other buildings there. Have there been any kind of master planning discussions about the reuse of that? And potentially, I know it completely throws a wrench in of moving, because Kevin Smith couldn't be here, one of our commissioners, but he asked this question and he asked me to ask it. The idea of moving the pump house off of that site and have just basically partially using that building. It's a completely new thought. But Eileen, have there been any overlap discussions with the owners of those properties?
There have been very conceptual and really focused on making sure that from the city's standpoint and from our design team standpoint, making sure that the space in front of Latitudes is open for pedestrians, making sure that the building that the massing doesn't block views and vistas through to the bay. I think that's been the major focus is we have given them comments that to make sure that whatever happens enhances rather than detracts from this public space. I don't know, Bryce, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think any feedback that you might have for us in regards to some of these things would certainly be useful. But yeah, I think Eileen's right. I mean, no one wants to see that building project out very far. For the same reasons we're getting pushback on the other building that we talked about with the boater facilities. But there is an incredible opportunity that the front door of those properties is going to be a great amenity, and they will be renovated and they'll do quite well, I think. But I think we need to stick with the bulk regulations that we have in place, and in terms of projecting that facade out, it should only be a little bit, if at all.
Thanks. Well, that didn't go down too far down a road, but let me just finally wrap things up here by saying about the circle. Fortunately, what's happening here does not preclude, or it's not really dependent on some later thing with removing the circle. If that were to ever come to pass, I think it would dovetail in with what you've shown here. So that's fortunate. So with that last comment, I think we've been at it now a fair amount of time, and unless anybody has any further comments, I'd like to thank you guys for great presentation and the great progress, and being attentive to our questions and concerns. Tim, you have any final wrap-up comments from your perspective?
Thank you. I concur, and the progress is really great, and we're always open to any meetings, to joint meetings, or we are able to schedule somewhat impromptu meetings. So great. We hope our feedback has been helpful, and the formal process will start soon with pre-applications on our part. And at that point, we'll start taking some minutes. But at this point, I really do appreciate everyone's time.
Yep, same here. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn from the members.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
And any more discussion?
Thanks for letting us join you.
All right, you're welcome. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right.
Very
Thank
good.
y'all.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Night.